9 root 10 minus 5 root 10 would leave us with 4 root 10. 8 root 2 plus 8 root 3, those aren't like terms or like radicals, so that's just the answer. We can't simplify that at all. Root 45 minus root 80 looks at first like they're just not like radicals, but both 45 and 80 have perfect squares in them, so let's try simplifying. This would be the square root of 9 times the square root of 5, or 3 root 5. This would be square root of 16 times the square root of 5, or 4 root 5. So that equals negative root 5, because 3 minus 4 is negative 1. The square root of 64 is 8, plus 3 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 5, or 3 times 2 root 5, or 6 root 5. Minus 5 times the square root of 25 times the square root of 5, or 5 times 5 root 5, or minus 25 root 5. And then I can't really simplify 3 root 2, so we're going to just tack that on at the end. So I see that I've got some like radicals in the middle. So I've got 8 minus 19 root 5 plus 3 root 2. That's the best we can do on that one. Well, I could straight up multiply 12 and 15 and go from there, but there's some pretty big numbers in there. So I'm going to break this up a little bit. First, I see that root 12 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. And when I start looking at 15, it doesn't have any perfect squares in it. But I've got this root 3 over here, and that's got a root 3. So I'm going to go ahead and break that into root 3 times root 5, because 3 times 5 is 15, and 4 times 3 is 12. Well, the square root of 4 is 2, and root 3 times root 3 would equal 3, because square root of 9 is 3, and then root 5. So this is 6 root 5. When I look at square root of 14 times the square root of 7, 14 doesn't have any perfect squares in it. But I see that root 7 over there, so I'm like, well, but wait, root 14 is 2 times 7. So I'm going to let this be the square root of 2 times the square root of 7 times the square root of 7. Those are a 7. The root 2 stays a root 2. Here I need to distribute, but I want to start because that 24 catches my eye. 24 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 6, or 2 root 6. When I do that, I notice I've got 3 root 6 plus 2 root 6, which is 5 root 6 times root 5. Well, neither root 5 nor root 6 can be broken down into any perfect squares or anything that they might have in common. So the 5 on the outside stays a 5 on the outside, but the radical becomes root 30. 14 root 15 plus 5 root 15 is a total of 19 root 15s. 5 root 2 plus 5 root 6, those aren't like radicals, so I can't do anything with them. Root 27 is the square root of 9 times the square root of 3. And root 48 is the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. So that's 3 root 3 minus 4 root 3, or negative root 3. Eight does have a perfect square. 14 doesn't. So if we start with the 8, that's the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. Well, 14 doesn't have any perfect squares, but it does have a 2 and then an extra 7. So the square root of 4 is 2. Root 2 times root 2 is another 2. And then we have root 7. So 4 root 7 is our simplified answer. Root 6 could be root 2 and root 3. Root 12 I would normally break into a 4 and a 3, but I notice that there's a 6 over here and 12 is divisible by 6. So I think it's actually a little easier to go root 6, root 6, root 2, because root 6 times root 6 is 6 root 2. Let's see, 30. 30 is not divisible by any perfect squares, so I can't break that down at all. So all I can do is distribute 2 root 30 plus root 150. Oh, but when I see that 150, that's divisible by 25. So this is the square root of 25 times the square root of 6. So I'm going to have 2 root 30 plus 5 root 6. That's the best I can do there. Down here, the square root of 49 is 7, plus 3 times the square root of 49 times the square root of 2, minus 2 times the square root of 9 times the square root of 3, plus 4 times the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. So 7 plus 3 times 7 root 2, minus 2 times 3 root 3, plus 4 times 4 root 2. So 7 plus 21 root 2 minus 6 root 3 plus 16 root 2. Well, those two are like radicals. So my best answer will be 7 plus 37 root 2 minus 6 root 3.